Navarre's wards don't just keep venom out. They dictate which forms of magic can even exist inside the kingdom's borders. Raised 600 years ago by the first six at Basgiath War College, the primary wardstone doesn't simply repel Poramish raiders or block venom incursions. It actively suppresses every magical tradition except dragon-channeled power, turning Navarre into a territory where only one source of magic operates freely. That selective filtering shapes the military hierarchy, the geopolitical deadlock with Poromil, and the entire reason dragon riders aren't just elite soldiers, but essential infrastructure. Yet the text keeps hinting that the wards demand hidden costs, sacrifices, misinformation, innocent lives spent to sustain the system. We're going to walk through how the wards actually work, what powers them, and why Navarre's survival strategy might rest on a foundation of deliberate lies. Start with the mechanics. The wards were established over 6 centuries ago by the first six, who anchored the primary wardstone at Basgiath War College above the Iacobos River. That wardstone serves as the stem, the central anchor for the entire network, so Basgiath isn't merely a military academy. It's the literal heart of Navarre's magical defense. Two sources power the wards: the combined magical effort of dragons, who actively weave and sustain the barrier, and the veil, a location or entity radiating potent energy into the system. This dual-source design suggests either redundancy for stability or a negotiated arrangement between multiple magical forces. The result is a protective bubble extending outward from the veil's radiating power, creating Navarre's circular borders. The kingdom's shape isn't a historical accident or strategic preference. It's dictated by the reach of the magic itself. Everywhere the veil's energy can sustain the wards, Navarre exists. Beyond that perimeter, the magic fails, and defense posts, staffed by conventional military units, mark the vulnerable, unshielded edges. What makes the wards unique is how they filter magic. They don't just block entry or repel enemies. They fundamentally alter the magical landscape within Navarre's borders. Only dragon-channeled magic can function inside the wards. Venin, Poromish wielders, any other magical tradition, all of it is suppressed the moment it crosses the boundary. This creates an environment where external magical warfare simply cannot manifest, giving Navarre an overwhelming strategic advantage in the 400-year conflict with Poromil. It also locks the kingdom into total dependence on its dragon riders and bonded dragons, because without them, the wards fail, and the entire defensive architecture collapses. Any threat to the dragon population, disease, venom attacks, political purges, becomes an existential threat to the kingdom itself. Notice how this flips the usual fantasy trope. Dragons aren't just weapons or symbols of power. They're the load-bearing pillars of national survival. Here's where the subtext gets darker. The wards require active maintenance, and that maintenance involves sacrifice and cost deliberately obscured through misinformation. The text hints that living under the wards includes lies that sustain the system and innocent lives lost to keep it running. We don't get the full picture yet, but the framing strongly suggests the ward's true function extends beyond simple protection. Are they siphoning power from the riders themselves? Are dragon bonds being weaponized in ways riders don't consent to? Is the veil not a benevolent power source, but something that demands payment? The historical detail that post-war Navarre closed its borders and offered temporary safe passage to outsiders as a diplomatic tool reveals how the wards became more than defense. They became leverage, a symbol of Navarrian supremacy and a bargaining chip in negotiations. Access to the ward's protection isn't universal. It's controlled, rationed, and used to enforce political hierarchy. The timeline adds weight to this. The wards were raised 600 years ago, around the same period that Navarre's provinces unified under bonded riders and entered an era of peace and prosperity. That timing suggests the wards and political unification weren't separate events. They were part of the same consolidation of power. The first six didn't just build a defensive barrier. They built the foundation for a centralized state where dragon riders became indispensable, where borders were no longer negotiable, and where magic itself was regulated by the institution at Basgiath. The 400-year war with Poromil represents the period during which this system was tested and refined, its defensive value proven repeatedly. But the fact that defense posts still exist beyond the ward's radius, staffed at great risk, shows the system isn't perfect. There are gaps, vulnerable zones where conventional warfare still matters, and where riders can't project their power. The wards are Navarre's greatest asset and its greatest vulnerability. They create a kingdom where only one kind of magic works, where dragons and riders are infrastructure rather than just military units, and where survival depends on sustaining a system that might rest on hidden sacrifices and suppressed truths. The hints about misinformation and innocent lives suggest that later revelations, likely involving the Veil, the First Six's true methods, or the cost of bonding, will crack open the sanitized version of Navarrian history that Violet and her classmates are taught. The wards aren't just protecting Navarre from venom, they're protecting the institution from questions about what the kingdom really is and what it's built on. If you want more Fourth Wing lore, stick around. There's a whole shelf of dragon politics, bond mechanics, and buried histories to unpack next.